And welcome to The Bottom Line, where we dive into the main business and economic stories of the day. Today, we can say that the Polish government's 2025 budget plans have been somewhat firmed up. There is, of course, debate and discussion regarding the direction and impact of the decisions made. But to get more insight into all of that, I am delighted to welcome one of our regular contributors, Professor Witold Orłowski, Chief Economic Advisor to PwC in Poland. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us once again. So I wanted to begin with the press conference, actually. So we know that Prime Minister Donald Tusk and Finance Minister Domański outlined the government budget. We know a little bit more about what is coming. The main things that stood out are that we have a generous budget, we have inflation under control, we have high GDP growth that lies ahead, and wage growth in real terms that is growing. It sounds very promising, and I wanted to hear what your main takeaways were.
No reason to applaud, by the way, because we also have got a high budget deficit. Increase this year and increase even the next year as well. Obviously, no surprise at all. Poland is planning to increase further the defense spending. We had 2% of GDP this year, around 4%. The next year we'll almost have 5%. But as every economist would say, that's the decision of the government. We do not dispute it. We only ask ourselves a question how to finance it so all the kind of macroeconomic assumptions of the budget look relatively optimistic, and indeed there is this feeling that the economy will start growing. It's already, by the way, it's already growing. It's growing even in the second quarter. The growth was the fastest one in all the EU, around 4%. Although only tomorrow, I guess, we will know what was the demand structure behind this. So more in-depth analysis of the growth pattern, remain to be made tomorrow.
Indeed, but if I can just jump in, because I listened to some of your other interviews in Polish media outlets. Indeed, some aspects of it sound positive, but I wanted to ask you, because the suggestion from Tusk and Domański is that the budget has been put together in the best possible way. But I wanted to ask you, because this budget has in some ways been inherited from the previous government, and now the best possible efforts have been put in to put this budget together, do you feel that the country's top priorities have been addressed in the current circumstances?
Well, I guess so. Although I must say that the best budget possible doesn't mean a good budget, because the deficit of 7% of GDP for the whole public sector, it will be most likely around between 5 and 6% of GDP. It's definitely much too high. But given the circumstances, and we've got some extraordinary increase of spending connected with the defense spending, huge defense spending. We are now will be the highest spending in relation to GDP, the highest spending NATO member as far as the defense is concerned. But as I said, nobody is objecting it because of the political reasons. But altogether, the budget has got big increase of all the expenditures practically, because, and that's the feeling, from the political point of view, it's not possible to propose any big cuts. The ruling coalitions had even problems putting together all the promises of various parties, and somehow they managed to do it. The budget, as I said, is, no reason to cry, no reason to applaud it, because obviously it's the deficit is too high, and Poland will have to continue to start actually its effort to reduce quite substantially the budget deficit over the next 3 years after 2025.
I just wanted to go back, if I may, I just wanted to go back to that element of defense spending, because I noticed that in one of your interviews you you emphasize the fact that it's very difficult to separate the politics and the economics when it comes to the government budget, and that is indeed true. But I wanted to ask you, in terms of the defense spending, it's a huge amount of expenditure, and obviously in the current geopolitical climate, it's necessary. But just from a purely economic perspective, if you could just put on your economist hat for a moment, do you think that this amount of expenditure, are we getting to a point, or is beginning to be a little bit detrimental in light of the debt and the deficit that we're facing?
Well, as I said, I mean, it's very. I mean, you ask me for something that's very difficult. I mean, to put apart one hat and to talk only about the other one. It's very difficult. I mean, the budget is always a mix of economics and politics. And basically, from the purely economic point of view, Poland obviously has got still a relatively low debt, and that means we can afford, I mean, if there's no other option, obviously, we can afford having even a relatively big budget deficit for additional 1 year or 1-2 years. But from the economic point of view, I must also tell that this process must be stopped at some moment. I fully understand the politics behind this budget. I understand the defense needs. I understand the health expenditure needs. I understand the pure politics, means all the promises made by the parties before the elections a year ago. But still, having said so, I must say one should start to be careful. Poland is not in a danger of any financial collapse or anything like that. I mean, we are a country with relatively low debt. Okay, the debt, as the Minister of Finance said, I mean, is likely to approach 60% of GDP next year. Well, majority of European nations and also the United States would only pray for having such a low level of the public debt. So I do not see big economic risks, kind of short-term economic risks.
So you would confirm that we're not approaching any...
Cannot continue forever.
So you could confirm that we are not approaching any financial crisis per se?
No. We are not approaching any financial crisis. I haven't checked it actually either. There was any reaction of the financial markets, the exchange rate, first of all, to the announcement of the big deficit for 2025. But my guess is, and that's my forecast, actually a kind of ex-post forecast, because I haven't checked it. I don't expect a big reaction. I mean, everybody expected something like that to happen. So Poland is obviously not in any imminent risk of the financial instability, but it's also obvious that Poland is under the EU excessive deficit procedure. And first of all, we know ourselves that this kind of the deficit cannot be kept for a long time. We've got although a constitutional limit in our constitution, a constitutional limit of 60% debt to GDP ratio. And so we cannot break it even from the domestic constitution point of view, not to mention any EU rules. So it's clear that 2025 must be a year of kind of a U-turn. I mean,
well,
even if
2025 is also...
We must start
2025 is also marked by the upcoming presidential elections, and there are suggestions that this budget is very much marked by the upcoming elections and has been characterized in order to already start getting the voters' attention. So I wanted to ask you, where could some cuts be made, perhaps, from your economist's point of view? Because really, if you look at it, there are always some kind of elections that are upcoming.
Yeah, that's right. But there's one good point about that, the economy is growing once again. After a year of stagnations, I mean, stagnation 2023, we will have most likely some 3% growth, 2.5-3% growth in this year, and the government expects 4% growth in next year, and the actual majority of the economists agree with that. And frankly speaking, given the situation, Poland doesn't have actually to make big cuts Poland simply has to slow down the growth of expenditures, and that's much easier than just cutting the expenditures. So in a growing economy, it's much easier to stabilize the budget, given that, as I said, I mean, the debt is not on the dangerous level, and the deficit itself is not still, it's not unimaginably huge, right? I mean, 6% of GDP, even if it happens this year, below probably, it's nothing really terrifying. It's too much, there's no doubt about that, but it's not terrifying. There are the countries with 10%, 15%, even 20% of the budget deficit related to GDP. And in such a situation, that was a risk. There was a big risk of the markets responding to it by the total collapse of the confidence.
But and just as we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you one more thing based on that press conference we heard. Domański is very confident about the increased level of investment that's going to go hand in hand with Polish growth. And I wanted to ask you what you think we can expect in terms of that investment here in Poland. Just very briefly as we wrap up.
Well, as I said, it will be only tomorrow that we will know what has happened in the economy in the second quarter. In the first quarter, there was almost no increase of the investment. Tomorrow at that time, we will know either the investment is already accelerating or not. I tend to believe that there will be the acceleration of the investment, and I'm also pretty confident. However, as I said, only tomorrow we will see either it's already happening or still we've got to wait. Well, the problem for the Polish economy, obviously, is the German economy. Because Germany is in a deep recession. I mean, maybe not very deep, but very long and prolonged and nasty recession. And for the time being, we see no trace of any improvement in the German economy. And the problem is that Germany is the main Poland's trading partner. And it's very difficult for the Polish economy to really accelerate in a sustainable way in a situation when Germany is shrinking, the German economy. And that's the biggest, putting apart obviously the war, the biggest economic worry of Poland is just the situation in Germany. If the German recession ends the next year, then we may have even better results than those ones that miss, both in the investment and exports and GDP, better result than the minister.
I'm afraid we're going to have to end our conversation there. I'm afraid we're going to have to end our conversation there, but I'm sure we'll have you back here on Business Arena with us. Witold Orłowski, Chief Economist Advisor to PricewaterhouseCoopers here in Poland. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us here on Business Arena. That was The Bottom Line, and I was your host, Marie Caso. Join us again tomorrow at 5 p.m. CET on TVP World. And for more business stories, check us out on X and on tvpworld.com. Coming up next, World Talks. Goodbye.